credited with reinvigorating the character. Much of what was seen in last year's Black Panther movie created by the work that you've done on the character. So, welcome.
Thank you. And appearing live on the Blu-ray disc, which no one has seen. Really? My family hasn't seen it. So I showed my granddaughter that where we're playing. I finally got because black people and technology don't mix, so they didn't know how to work it. So I'm at the house. I'm like, okay, push this button, push that button. So okay, so I pop up on the screen, and she's 8 years old. She's watching me for about 5 minutes. She goes, "This is so boring."
Also want to introduce Don McGregor.
Yes.
Don was a writer and editor for Marvel in the 70s. Wrote Jungle Action, number 6 to 24. That was between 1972 and 76. What writer-editor Dwayne McDuffie's called an overlooked and underrated classic. You were trying to write Panther's Quest and Marvel Comics Presents series and the 4-part Panther's Prey in 89 and 91. Is that right?
Okay, if you say so.
So welcome, Don.
We got along a lot better in the 1980s and 1990s. Panther's Quest and Panther's Prey were a lot more fun to write than Panther's Rage, which was a fight every single issue.
All right.
Everything that people love about that movie, and movies getting all these accolades, Marvel editorial hated.
Not anymore.
Swear to God, they hated. Oh no, because now they actually, and I'm not making this up, they just came out with a Luke Cage issue that's got Marvel's greatest creators. And Don McGregor is like, it's my Cockroach Hamilton issue of Luke Cage. Why they picked that one, it was in the middle of a 3-part story, and they did part 2. But I swear to God, when that book was written, I was not one of their greatest creators. Is this on?
I don't know. Can everybody hear?
There you go.
There
we go.
Oh, there you go.
I'm having some voice problems, so as it is, in fact, I think I'm going in for an endoscopy. They're actually calling me before I left to come to this convention this morning, so bear with me.
He's got a stack of cards here, so let's dive into the
No,
stack.
no. Most of them are blank.
Oh, okay. Just like me, actually.
So the first one's for Don. So the 1970s was a Marvel explosion of new titles, right? And so can you explain what led Jungle Action to actually seeing the light of day and how you were selected to write that book?
Yeah, because the Black Panther wasn't important. The jungle genre stories were not sellers in comics. Joe Kubert had just done Tarzan for DC in that time frame, and they weren't able to sell Tarzan. I was working on staff at Marvel at the time, and I was reading the reprint books. They were reprinting the Jungle Action stories from the 1950s, and they were just, some of them just incredibly racist stories, and my job was to go in and read these fucking stories. And I'd have, I can't say that? Oh, sorry. I'm sorry about that, but that's exactly what they were. Now, so I did, kind of meekly, because I wouldn't have used, then. Geez, guys, can't you really do something about these really terrible stories you're doing? And so when the line exploded, as you said, when it was expanding, Jungle Action existed, and so did Amazing Adventures. And so what they decided was they were going to do some of the books only 2/3 new material, and they would use still some of the reprint. That way, keep the cost of the books down. So the original books, we had 13 pages. And the reasons I was given the Black Panther and Killraven was that they didn't think these books were going to sell. But they had to give me something. It wasn't like a written rule, but if you hired a person, they were a writer in those days, it was like, okay, you're not going to survive on $125 a week, which is what the base pay was. Then they would give you something to write. So they gave me those 2 books, thinking they were going to die. I got real fortunate because Rich Buckler and I had met and we became friends. And Rich said, I'm doing the Black Panther with Don. And they didn't want him on the book. Rich was too important because they wanted him on the Fantastic Four. They wanted him to do the Avengers. They wanted him on top titles, the ones they really were watching. Well, because Rich insisted upon it and they didn't want to piss Rich off, they let Rich and me do that book. And because of that, I was able to screw around with the title page designs and any kind of storytelling I wanted to do. I would just sit, Rich actually got me to move out to the Bronx. It was my first place I was staying with other people. So Rich got me out into the Bronx because he lived there, so I could go over to his place at night, and we'd sit side by side. And I said, okay, can we turn the page on its side this way so the waterfall, I can get the maximum amount of height, and then we can like split the panels so I can really kind of get inside what's happening with it. And Rich, thank God, God bless him, was willing to, you know, take all that extra work and do it. And that allowed me to start doing that kind of storytelling. And the other thing was, they would never have allowed me to do a novel. So what I did is I designed that Panther's Rage logo on the first page, and I said to Rich, I want to design it, and it's very Steranko influenced. And then I went
Let me jump in a second here, because let me interpret for Mr. McGregor. When he says novel, what he's talking about is like back in those days, the comics were all like I Dream of Jeannie. It was like you had like this episode where Darren falls into a well, and you have the next episode where Darren is shot into outer space, and you know they were just very episodic, and they don't connect in any way. You know, so basically Don McGregor is the father of the comic book miniseries, which is his credit or him to blame, however you look at miniseries. But the Panthers, you know, but what you're talking about, it was the first miniseries.
They never would have okayed it.
Right.
What I did was I went into the stat rooms, which today now, that is huge machines that you could take artwork and stat it to any size. And I went into Stu Schwartzberger and said, Stu, I need you to stat this down to this size, and that size. And because I was on staff, what I would do is just as the book was going out, I put Panther's Rage Continue. It wasn't until book 5, when Billy Graham was coming on, that they realized, hey, wait a minute, what is this Panther's Rage Continues? But see, by then it was too late. It was already a done deal. And by that time, I don't think they didn't care about that because they were more concerned about the fact that there were all these black people in Panther's Rage.
Really?
And yeah, absolutely, because the problem was, all they told me was, you're going to do the Black Panther and it's in Wakanda. Now, Christopher, correct me if I'm wrong, but their mythology is Wakanda is a super secret civilization, hidden, nobody can get to it, nobody knows where it is, because they got such sophisticated technology, no one can find the place, except every once in a while white people stumble into it. And my feeling when I came to the book was like, well, if every issue white people stumble into this place for 13 pages, that's going to make a terrible story. But they didn't take into account, okay, it's set in Wakanda, that means everybody's Wakandan. That means everybody's black. Before Billy even takes on to the book, it's already a big deal. They want, where's the white people down? They wanted white people in there. And it was a continual fight, not just on that level, but, you know, that was definitely one of the major fights that we had for the 2 years of the thing, and they kept wanting to know when it was going to end. And, you know, to be honest with you, I didn't know. I think I wish I had 10 books and then...
Don, let me jump in again. Okay,
yeah,
so let me, again, interpreting for Mr. McGregor here. Okay, so when you saw the Black Panther film, 85% of what you saw on that screen was created by Don McGregor. Okay, the world of Wakanda was certainly, as a concept, was created by Stan Lee, but Stan only wrote a handful of Black Panther stories. And as far as the infrastructure, as far as, okay, the gorilla cult lives up here, and here's like this Warrior Falls, you know, over here, and here's this particular ritual, here's this heart-shaped herb, the heart-shaped herb bit where you're empowered by this thing. That's Don McGregor. He created all that stuff. Okay, so when I saw the thing, now Stan Lee, rest his soul, Stan Lee was a friend of mine, Stan Lee was a mentor of mine. I had the great privilege of not only just knowing him, but being actually trained by him. One of the few people still, you know, scraping by in this business that was actually trained by somebody who knew what they were talking about. So I give Stan all the credit, you know, for this wonderful creation. I take nothing away from Stan, but you know, I saw the splash screen, the title card in the film was like, you know, based on characters created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, you know, and I really wished, you know, it was a more honest accreditation where it was like by Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Don McGregor. because Don created, he really, the infrastructure of what you're seeing, that's Don McGregor holding up that world on his shoulders, being paid, what, $35 a page? Were you making that much in those days?
$12 a page. The first issue of Panther's Rage that I designed the maps.
Yeah.
I created Eric Killmonger,
Right.
and I threw Panther off that waterfall.
You bastard.
$12, $162. How much did that movie make? I told you didn't have to worry about notes.
Yeah, no problem.
So, by the way, Christopher, thank you so much. It means a lot coming from a man this talented. It means a lot to me, Christopher.
Yeah, I can find my car keys. That's how talented I am.
Don, there was a time I guess you could only put Killmonger on the first cover of the book, and then they didn't let you put him back on the cover. Why is that?
He's a white guy in dreads. I mean, he's a black guy in dreads. What are you asking? You know?
When I was working beside Rich and we were designing the character, I kept saying to Rich, he's going to be so fierce looking, he's so strong and so angry. And it's going to just look like Chala has you look at him like, what? Chala's got no chance against this guy. And I just wanted to create a villain. A hero really needs a villain that's going to test everything. How is he going to really get through this? I had nothing to do with the covers. I didn't have that power. The only reason I was able to get away with what I got away with inside the books is because they weren't reading those books. They were only looking at the artwork, and I had Rich Buckler artwork.
Right.
So all they were seeing, and they would design, they would talk to the artists about the covers through the artwork. So when we did the first cover, when Rich did the first cover with Killmonger on it, and they saw it, they said, no, you can't. Killmonger can't appear again. And if you think I'm making it up, you just have to look at the covers. He never appears again until after a year's worth of books. And he does appear on one brief cover in a small figure, but originally it's these snow ice wolves are attacking Chala on the cover, tearing him to shreds. And apparently editorial decided, no, it's got to have a human villain in it. And so they didn't redraw the artwork. They took and they drew a little tiny action figure of a Killmonger between the wolves' eyes going, he's back, Killmonger! And then the only other time he was ever allowed in those days on the cover was the final issue of Panther's Rage.
Well, you have to understand it was very different times. So it presented a risk to the company. I mean, Stan and Jack, they originally wanted the Black Panther to have a mask that was more like the Flash, that had a cow, or Batman, that had this cutout where you'd see his nose and his chin, and you'd know right away that he was African American. And I'm reading between the lines that the company's never actually come out and said, well, we were really racist in those days, you know. But I think the full face mask was Stan's way of getting around the company, because it was, what, 1966? Yeah.
Yeah.
He did have a half mask in the Avengers at some point.
Okay.
For a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, there's an original drawing that Jack did. I don't know how much input Stan had or didn't have into that.
The Cold Tiger.
No, it's not. I don't know. Well, maybe it's the Cold Tiger one. He's actually like in a bumblebee outfit.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of yellow.
Cold Tiger, yeah.
So that might be the Cold Tiger one. And thank God they won't put the other one anyhow, because it was kind of.
That was Kirby's original design for the character.
Yeah.
So I want to talk briefly about what the second storyline that you wrote in Jungle Action, where it was Black Panther versus the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah.
And can you explain what happened in that? The story ended in, well, the book was canceled mid-storyline. What led up to that?
Oh, one of the presidents probably read it. Holy cow, what are you doing out there? My uncle was in the Klan.
Okay, I've told the story a lot of times, but as I stated earlier, they were always arguing for more. They wanted white people in the strip, and I kept arguing like, well, where are the white people supposed to come from? Nobody knows where this place is, and that was my argument every issue. Because believe me, there was not an issue I was not called into the editor's office after it saw print. It's the same thing with Killraven. And Killraven, because of the interracial stuff, that became, I was a target now everywhere I went. And I had gay characters waiting in the wings, which I dared not do because that was I knew that would be my final book. So when I was coming up to the end of Panther's Rage, and because the type of writer that I am, I worry all the time. Like before I even wrote a page of Panther's Rage, I said, okay, it's going to be a novel, and I think they should all be novels, and I should take them to different places so it won't be the same story over and over again. And I realized that Stan and Jack had never done anything with his mother. He did a lot of stuff with his father, and if you read Panther's Rage, there's a lot of stuff with his father, but I never once mentioned his mom. Because what I intended to do was do a story set in South Africa and deal with apartheid and the Panther searching for his mother. And unfortunately, at the time I was going through a divorce. By the time here's the kind of cost those books had on me. Now I'm going through a divorce. I'm going into child custody courts to see my daughter, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to go and do the research that would be required for me to do that kind of story. Therefore, I had to do something that I knew a little more, it would be easier for me to write. And it was America's bicentennial, and there was already this increasing divisiveness, even without social media. The Ku Klux Klan was on the rise, and I thought, and the Reverend Sun Myung Moon was around, and these very extremist groups were forming, and I thought, I'll write about the Panther versus the Klan and these religious extremist groups, and I thought, and it'd be my birthday gift to America. Apparently they didn't quite see it the same way I did, and as soon as it came out, I think when I put Chala on the cross, that was like the final, and the Klan burning him at the cross. But by the way, I think there's two things I'm still glad I handled them the way that I did. The initial line when he's on the cross and the caption reads, "He is not a symbolic Christ figure." Because so many people in comics thought, make the hero a Christ figure, and this is going to be deep and important. I want you to see him as a human being. And the great thing is that not only does Chala survive, he uses the cross and burns the Klan. So to me, there was like a real sense of being able to, tell a story and get the audience, hopefully, to care where you were going with that. However, the editor did not see it that way. They called me in and they, "Don, you can't be doing this. You can't." I said, "Geez, for 2.5 years, you people bug me for white people. I finally give you some white people, and there's just no satisfying you guys." You're fired, Don. Actually, and I swear to God, I am not making this up. The editor actually says to me, "Don, we have to take you off the Black Panther." This is, I swear to God, the exact words. "You're too close to the black experience." Let Christopher tell some stories. I'm sorry, Christopher. Sorry that I took so much time.
No, that's fine. Chris, what were your influences in writing? You seem very cinematic in your portrayal of Black Panther. Almost like when I was reading it, it kind of felt like I was watching Pulp Fiction a little bit, with the jumping around and.
Yeah, it's like Pulp Fiction and Rewind, But yeah, playing around with the time signatures and things like that. So I was taught by many people. Certainly, Stan, Jim Shooter was the guy who hired me when I was 17 years old, when I started working at Marvel. I'm the first African-American writer, well, when I say writer, I mean someone who was assigned regularly to a monthly title. There were, obviously, Billy Graham wrote, and other African-Americans did some writing. But I was first African-American writer and first African-American editor at Marvel Comics in 1978, and then at DC Comics in 1990. So when I was hired at Marvel, I had no idea that I was the first anything. I was a kid, and I was just like, I got the job, really? You know, and I don't tell anybody, but I used to skip to work. I'd come out of the subway, and I'd be so excited about getting to work, and I'd be going down Madison Avenue, and I'd be like whistling, and I'd be, you know, and then I stop and I go, okay, brothers don't skip. You know, more dignity, you know, but I couldn't wait to get to the office. I loved every minute of it, and I was an intern, so I was, you know, I walked through the door. There's this kid there named, it was John Romita. John Romita was the no, he wasn't an art director. Maurice Severin was the art director at the time. But John Romita, you know, he's the legendary Spider-Man artist. So his kid was working in the bullpen, you know. So I get there, and here's this teenager in the bullpen, John Romita Jr. apparently, you know, and he comes running up to me and goes, "Wow, am I glad to see you?" He's like my first friend in comics, because he shakes my hand, and then he immediately takes off the key to the Xerox machine and goes, "Here, it's all yours." John Romita Jr. is a good friend to this day. So I was just really happy to be there, and I lost track of my question. What was your question again? Oh yeah, the time signature thing. Yeah. So my Jim Shooter was kind of the overall arching sort of Machiavellian supervillain, arch villain of Marvel Comics. So he's really the guy that was kind of guiding my career, because he really wanted to build up my chops and so forth. So he took me down the hall and handed me off to a gentleman named Dennis O'Neill. And Denny O'Neill, from that point on, he put me on Power Man and Iron Fist, and Denny started to train me, and Denny became sort of my sensei. And I mean, we spent like hours and days walking around Thompson Square Park, and he used to go to all these like little really awful kung fu movies, you know, these like B and C kung fu movies, you know, with him and this little skinny kid named Frank Miller, some kid. So we'd go and watch these little movies and stuff like that. But he taught me a lot about writing. And what I liked about Denny and Frank and some others, and I'm sorry for leaving others out, it's just, to me, when Denny and Neil Adams, and I'm like the biggest Neil Adams geek ever, when they were working together, what they did is they made the world so real. They made it what Stan Lee used to call the world outside your window. And they made that world so real that the heightened super elements of it, when Green Lantern powered up, for example, it popped. It popped against the reality base that they had built there. So I tend to write everything sort of grounded in reality, and taking as hard a look at it as I can. I just finished a run on Justice League where, you know, I took a really hard look of like, what if there really were a group of godlike people who self-appointed themselves as our protectors, who live on the satellite that's orbiting the planet. We don't know what kind of weapons they got up there. We don't know who controls that airspace. We don't know where that technology came from. They have this beaming technology where they can transport from point A to point B. Why don't they offer, if they have that technology, why don't they offer that to first responders, to hospitals, to our military? Why are you keeping that from us? Who appoints these people? Who's controlling these people? If these people actually existed, there would be hearing after hearing after hearing. The politics that we're experiencing right now, the divisions within our society, would go nuts if there was if there actually was a Justice League. So I'm not shilling for DC, but yeah, go buy that book. You know, and that's the kind of stuff that just turns me on. So when I got my hands on Black Panther, you know, at first I didn't want to do it, and I had to get talked into doing it. But I said, you know, how many of you seen the movie Casino? with Robert De Niro, okay? So at some point in that film, the mob comes up to De Niro by the pool and try to talk him into running the casino. And he doesn't want to do it. He turns him down. He tries to talk him out of it. He goes, what do I know about running a casino, you know? So finally he agrees to do it, but he says, look, if I'm going to do it, I got to do it my way. I mean it. No interference. I got to do it my way, you know? And I gave him this list of like, I'm going to do it this, I'm going to do it that. Black Panther's going to be really capable. I'm going to take him back to the technology that Stan and Jack originally created him with, you know, and oh yeah, it's going to be funny. And all the blood drained out of their face. What do you mean funny? You know, what do you mean funny? You know, Black Panther's never been funny. Well, he's funny now. Well, he's not funny, but I put a guy in the comic who is funny, you know, so we're going to inject a lot of humor to it. And I had the opportunity to just build on, you know, I could have come in and just kind of like did a whole sort of like scorched earth, let's just wipe out everything and start again. But I went and I read all your stuff and I was like, it's all here. Look at all these tools that he left. He left us this big, enormous toolbox. And now, by the way, people get paid tens of thousands of dollars to create worlds. You know?
Yeah.
They do. I mean, the stuff that you did, you know, they hire these people to develop this. So they, you know, these consultants to come in and develop the whole world for you know, for this a shared universe, what they call it. You know, and they create this Bible.
By the way, just to interject on the humor bit, I had a humor character planned, and Marvel said no. And that's how Tiente and Kasibi ended up being the Abbott and Costello. Because they would not, they said, you can't do a comedic character. Black people will be upset if you put a comedic character in there. And I thought, this book is going to be so, I know it's going to be dealing with really heavy themes and grim situations and death and mortality. And I thought, no, there's humor in life too. And because it always bothered me, Tiente and Kasibi are too bad at the beginning of it, but by default, they became the guys that every time the Panther came in, and they would add humor to it. And then people actually began to really like Tiente and Kasibi.
Right.
You know, because they did bring that, and how is Chalo going to just, what terrible things are you going to do to this time? So yeah, I'm with you. I wanted that element in the books as well.
Yeah, but
and they just wouldn't do it.
But the reason why I got to do it is I made my guy Matthew Perry from Friends, Chandler Bing. He was a clueless white guy. You know, he's a very capable person, but he was a person who had a cultural awakening. He had a real, and he became the point of view character for the reader's resistance, because traditionally, comic books have been created by white males for white males. I'm happy to say that that's changing a lot. Women are playing an enormous part in reshaping publishers' thinking about what sells now. And they're looking at a lot of where they have to reorient their thinking. But now it's really less of a big deal if the character's nationality. But at the time in the 1990s, my main concern was how am I going to get white people to read this book? So I gave them a character that gave voice to all of their misconceptions, preconceptions, whatever the reader's resistance was to reading a Black Panther comic. I had Ross, this guy, Everett K. Ross. He was the State Department guy in the movie. He wasn't funny in the movie. That's not my fault. He's hilarious in the comic book. The legend is that Martin Freeman, the actor, did not want to play another comedic role because he had just come off of Sherlock for so many years. You know, but Martin, you know, believe me, it would have been better if he was funny. Anyway, so he became the reader's point of view character that broke down a lot of readers' resistance, and the word of mouth just got out, and you heard it over and over again where comic fans were saying, no, trust me, you gotta read the Black Panther. No, you gotta read the Black Panther. And that's how we built our audience from there. And I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. Go.
Well, it's your job to talk. My job to just throw it out there. So that was, you told me I have a lot of cards up here. You're killing the cards.
Okay. Well, we can open the floor to questions, though. They got questions.
You brought up a little bit about how far we've come as far as a medium. So that was one of my questions was the landscape in comics. What does that look like today for people of color as opposed to when you were breaking the color barrier in comics? And really, kind of how far have we come?
Well, what's
how far do we have to go?
what's really funny is that I didn't know I was breaking anything, and nowadays, a lot of writers now, they want to make a statement. They're like, how can I, this is my brand. How do I make a statement? And I was just trying to pay the rent, and I wanted to write a Black Panther comic that had integrity. And it had something, going for it, but I wasn't trying to make any particular statement. I was, I was trying to have a roof over my head. And then in those days, if you ever watched the TV show Mad Men, which is set in the 60s, if you look at the Mad Men pilot, the first episode, that's exactly what Marvel's offices looked like. I had that desk. I know that paneling, that wood paneling, and those doors that ringed around the building, and there were a lot of racist jokes, there were a lot of sexist jokes. It was a different time, and although there was, certainly some racist humor directed at me, it didn't bother me that much because there was Italian jokes, and there was Irish jokes, and there was Jewish jokes, and the only jokes that were not allowed on the floor, that nobody really told out loud, were Polish jokes. Because Jim Shooter was Polish, and he was the boss. So, oddly enough, no Polish jokes.
I believe Ralph Macchio had a few.
Yeah, Ralph, probably it's private.
He used to wear Shooter's face and the heels of his shoes so he could walk on Shooter's face all day long. If that's not just beginning.
That's
I don't think I'm giving anything away.
That's a whole other thing there. So now you skip ahead 40 years. I've been in the business 40 years now. My God, I'm old. I'm really kind of out of the mainstream because I live in a quiet little Unabomber shack in the woods in Colorado, and I mind my business, and I'm writing Vampirella, which he didn't mention, but writing Vampirella and finishing up my run on Deathstroke and so forth.
Yeah, he didn't mention Detectives Incorporated and Saber and Ragamuffins, but we're not holding that against him.
But I'm not.
Deeper in my cards here.
I'm not as plugged into the business side of things as I was, and I'm a little out of touch, because every now and then somebody will say something that just sounds absurd to me. The legendary writer. I'm like, really? No, come on now. I'm just a schmuck trying to pay the rent,
Legend looking for a gig. That was my line.
Yeah, legend looking for a gig. But it seems to me now that. In fact, we're having this debate over at Dynamite because we're bringing out a spin-off of the Vampirella book, and I want this character to be black, and they want the character to be white, and I'm like, okay, you're living in the 1960s, okay? This is the 2020s now, where diversity is the key word here, and not just to make the character black, just to make the character black, but I'm just saying that my African-American version of this particular character, whose name I can't mention right now, but my African-American version of this character is just way more interesting and hotter and sexier, and you just see her standing there and you go, well, that's a way more interesting character than the blonde character from the old Warren days from the 1970s. So we're having this debate now, but I'm talking to people. These are the people who run the company, and they're actually older than me. I'm old, but they're older, and they kind of have this other mindset. But I'm like, you got to be in touch with what is happening in the world now, and what's happening in the world now is Beyonce, is Jay-Z, is Cardi B, whoever that is, and there's this. It's a look around the room. Look who's in this room. That's what's happening. That's your audience. You need to make the comic books identifiable to your audience. It's not all straight white guys anymore. It's everything and everybody. So it's a very pluralistic thing here. One thing I do want to mention, I'm sorry, let me just give you 2 more seconds here, is for Marvel's 80th anniversary, they put out this big special, and they all had these 1-page stories or something in it, So they called me and asked me to do the Black Panther thing because Ta-Nehisi Coates was otherwise unavailable. Well, now I'm so flattered. Thank you. Couldn't get Ta-Nehisi, so yeah. So what I did was I scripted a story where I borrowed quotes from Ta-Nehisi's book, Between the World and Me, which is a brilliant book, and I urge everyone to read it. It's real short. If you don't like books, it's real short. It'll take that long to read it. I read it 4 times. It's emotionally moving. It's just a brilliant piece of work. So it was a single page, and Black Panther's being interviewed, and Brian Stelfreeze, this is Ta-Nehisi's artist on Black Panther, he's drawing it. So since Ta-Nehisi couldn't write it himself, I decided to give Panther voice, give the Panther Ta-Nehisi's voice. So in the comic strip, Black Panther is sitting for an interview, and every response he gives in the interview is a quote from Ta-Nehisi's book. And then they showed it to Ta-Nehisi, and he said, no, don't do that. You know, so I hope one day we can actually show the version that, because I had to rewrite it and take his quotes out. Ta-Nehisi wanted to keep his world separate. I do this for the Atlantic, I do this for myself, and I do this for Marvel Comics. And you know, he wanted to, he didn't want the worlds to collide, but I wanted to have Ta-Nehisi show up, even though Ta-Nehisi couldn't actually do it himself. And it was a brilliant piece, and not a brilliant, not me being brilliant. It's brilliant because the book that he wrote is so brilliant, and I just really wanted to share that with his Black Panther fans.
Don, I want you to mention Detectives Inc., like I said I would let you. And then we'll take a few
Wait,
questions.
what do you mean, let?
I'm running this panel.
Fabian, he said to me, I was at a con with him recently, and I don't know, we were taking some photographs and joking back and forth, and at some point, Fabe said, you know, Don, I think if I was your editor, you and I would have clashed. And I said to Fabe, I said, no, we wouldn't have clashed. We wouldn't have clashed at all. Because by that time that you were editing, it would have been in the 90s or going into the 2000s, and if you look at my work, I would, you're taking it that the editor is looking at who the writer is going to be, judging whether they want to let them be the writer or not. I'm looking at you as whether I want you as my editor or not. And if I feel like you and I aren't on the same page, you and I aren't working together. It's not going to happen. And it makes it easier for everybody. So, you know, when I came back to Marvel, for instance, I could do Panther's Quest with Terry Kavanagh. And Terry Kavanagh took tremendous heat for that book. If you know this business, and I'm sure Christopher will back me up on this, Marvel Comics Presents was a format, 8 chapter stories, and 8 books per story. Maybe if you're Wolverine, maybe 10. I think at Panther's Quest I was on book 12, and Terry says, Don, we have editorial meetings every week. They want to know how many books. I said, you know, I'm still going up to the Schomburg Museum, Terry. I have no idea. I'm still researching, and what I learn when I'm there will become a part of the story, but I don't know what it will be, and I want to make it as comprehensive and as accurate as I can. He said, but Don, I gotta give him a number. I said, I don't know, 25. No. You know, I don't know what happened the time that Terry went in to editorial and told him, hey, Don says 25. Now I'm further on into the story, and there comes a point, every story is 8 pages. All of Terry's inventory stories are 8 pages. I need 10 pages for this chapter. There's just a point I have to get, the information has to get to the audience then. I can't do it later. And I go to Terry and say, Terry, listen, and I know your arguments already. I need a 10-page chapter. Don, I don't have any 6-page stories. I said, I know. I will sell my soul to the devil. Name any character you want. I'll do a 6-page story for you. And that's how the Jim Lee drawing Sub-Baroness story took place. And then my wife Marsha colored it. And then the bullpen got on Marsha, started yelling, oh, they will never do all the coloring stuff. I was do this and do this, let's do that. And then they yelled at her. And Marsha was like close to tears going on the train back to Brooklyn. And she said, oh, they'll never work, they'll never do all that stuff. I said, they're absolutely right. However, they won't do it all. But they need to do 70 to 80% of it, because if they don't, the book is returnable. So they're going, and sure enough, the book came out, and a lot of the special effects we wanted to do with the coloring, got into that book, and then people came up and apologized to Marcia. And so that's how, and by the way, at the end of the book, I said to Terry, to be honest with you, I can't finish it in 25. But if you give me 16-page last chapters, I can do this really big ending that I want to do. And Terry said, sure, whatever you want, Don. And we, I think it's still, I'm really proud of that book, what we did with it, when we did it, because nobody was touching that kind of stuff. The only thing was, I had named the villain that had kidnapped the Panther's mother, and I come back from vacation somewhere, there's a National Geographic, and there is this white guy in the Parliament with the same name as my villain. And literally, yeah, Anton, yeah. I had to, so what?
Fraterius?
Well, I had to change the name.
Oh, okay.
And I had to keep the lettering the same amount of letters, because it had already been lettered for 2 chapters, but fortunately, they hadn't seen print. And that was the reason, by the way, that we had to date it, because then I got in trouble for dating it and saying it was 1983, because Marvel didn't normally, I guess I didn't even know this. The reason I dated it was because they changed the passbook laws. And I had the passbook laws exactly the way they were in 1983. And I said, it's outdated. If I don't specifically state it's this, it's going to look like I didn't know it. But it was too late to change it. It was already visually drawn. And Gene Coleman was not going to go back and go, yeah, now I'm going to redraw the whole page. No. That's not going to happen. So anyhow, and I'm proud. I thank Terry Carroll every time for believing in me, for Gene Cohen drawing it. And by the way, one of the best art decisions I ever made was deciding on a young guy named Dwayne Turner, who was just starting out to do Panthers Parade. And he did such a great, gorgeous work environment, and we're best friends to this day. Thank you, Dwayne. And Billy Graham, because Billy, he gave me places to stay when I first came into New York City, just trying to sell my stories, and believed in me, and I spent a lifetime with Billy. Thank you, Billy.
All right, does anybody have any questions? We're gonna have like 5 more minutes. If anybody has a question? Yep, there we go.
Where would you like Black Panther to go from here? What do you see for a future?
Wow, okay, so at the time that Ta-Nehisi Coates and Brian Stelfreeze took over the book, I really thought that I couldn't imagine what was left to do with the character. And I was so wrong about it, because they really thought of things. I built on basically essentially what Don had done, and I think they built on what I had done, what Reggie Hudlin and some others had done, and found this new voice and this new vocabulary. And I was just like incredibly, and still am, just incredibly impressed by that. So it's a hard question to answer. Every now and then, somebody at Marvel will call me and says, hey, what'd you do to Black Panther? They talked me into doing both of us into doing a piece for the annual, right?
I turned them down.
You didn't do it?
I turned them down. Some people look.
Quit.
I may.
Yeah.
I may. It's not a definite thing yet. We'll find out in the next group.
No. I meant like last year, they had a Black Panther annual. And I did like an 8-page story for it or something.
Right.
And they had to talk me into it. And the thing about an 8-page story is you get paid for 8 pages, but it takes you the same amount of time to think up the plot line, whether the story's 8 pages or 80 pages. You have to figure out all those nuts and bolts. And I'm banging my head against the wall going, my God, Black Panther, it's been so many years. What am I going to do with the Black Panther? He's the guy that dresses like a kitty, right? Okay, what else? I never say never, but I would be a bad choice to hire to write Black Panther, because I wrote Black Panther for 5 years. I shot him into outer space, okay, at some point, and that's when I realized, okay, you have just jumped the shark. Black Panther in space! But I'm sure somebody like Ta-Nehisi, the next Ta-Nehisi, he's warming up. Thank God there's just no end to brilliant young people and young minds, and some of them are probably sitting right here in the front row. You know, you look like you got something on your mind here, so.
He's
I'm
ready,
watching you.
he's ready.
Yeah, he's ready.
I was I turned them down for that project too. I said, no, I just couldn't see like 8 pages or 12 pages, whatever they eventually gave me. I said, how is that going to compete with 600 plus pages? Like what? So I come back all these years and I actually put a Facebook down, I'm not going to do it. And then, I don't know, I got like 500-600 responses. And people like Mike Mayhew and Dwayne Turner and all these people say, Don, we'd draw it if you'd write it. And I said, oh man, there's nothing. At first I thought about trying to do something topical, but you don't want to trivialize that stuff in a short story. And then I thought, it has an emotional heart to the truth. And something came up that I thought, oh, if I do this, the audience that loved what I did won't be disappointed. Well, they will. A part of them will hate me for doing it, but they'll be emotionally moved by it. And if it does get that emotional reaction, then they won't be feeling like, oh, Don, just knock it out. It's just another story. And then they got Daniel Lacuna to draw it. Mike Mayer said, yeah, they gave you one of the best stunts, so you're in good hands. In good shape. So I ended up being glad I kind of did it. That gave me a chance to do it. But my initial reaction is always like, why mess with it? Why come back? But we'll see.
All right, one more question?
Would you ever be interested in touching on
Sorry.
the storyline of the crew? Because I feel like what you were writing back then, today, it's even more important.
I was so mad when they canceled that book. I was so mad I was going to quit comics, and they said, "Okay, you can write Captain America." I said, "Okay." And then I did Captain America for a year, and then they decided to take Captain America out of the book and relaunch it as the Falcon, which felt like a demotion and felt very racial and blah 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 blah, which is not your question you asked. And then I did quit comics, so the crew was part of it. The crew was supposed to be Marvel's version of Milestone Media. It was supposed to be marketed with a new strategy and to through different channels and try to get it to Latino and African American markets and so forth. And that was the promise. And they long story short, they didn't do it. And then it was canceled preemptively before the first issue even shipped. So there was a lot of opening of arteries and bleeding onto the pages, putting that thing up on its feet. And we worked very hard on it. We're very proud of it. And I thought it just didn't get the shot that it deserved. Partially as a result of that, I didn't write comics for almost a decade. I just went, you know what, this other jobs. Let me do something else for a while.
All right, so last question real quick.
This question for Christopher. Why didn't you originally want to write the Black Panther comics?
Because by that time, between the McGregor years and me, the character became dormant, and it just, I was developing a history of being offered characters of color because I was a African American person, number one, and then number two, I just felt like, black characters didn't sell, and I'd be back to trying to push this rock up the hill, and I didn't want to do it.
Well, and Christopher's absolutely right. I mean, it's what Marvel editorial did. If you look back in the 70s, they started what they considered a women's line of comics. One of them was Night Nurse. I think the one was called The Cat or something like that. And maybe the other one was Patsy Walker. And they gave 3 different women writers the chance to write comics. I don't think any of those comics lasted more than half a year, and once those books were done, those women writers didn't have jobs anymore. If they can, they will try to really, they want to put you in cages. I always felt in this business that in those days, especially in the 70s, okay. That their job was to put me in the cage, and my job was to try to reach through the cage, pick the lock, get out as much as I could before they threw me back in the cage, so then locked it again, and I would have to find a way to get that lock undone again. but so that you could have an individual voice. And that's what Christopher Priest has, an individual voice. So that's why you respond to his work. And anybody who wants to have an individual voice, I don't care what race or gender you are, you want to be able to find a way to tell the best story that you can that reflects the world that you see and entertains people.
Ladies and gentlemen, Christopher Priest, Don.